A choice is not a choice when it is an echo. Commander Ava Rostova stood on the bridge of the survey vessel Lichisons, a ghost haunting a graveyard. Outside the Kepler 186F system, now grimly nicknamed Solitude's End, was a tapestry of wreckage and silence. Ancient shattered megastructures tumbled in orbit slower than a dying breath. This was a place where giants had fallen, leaving behind bones of exotic matter and dust clouds of vaporized ambition. Her mission was simple: catalog the dead and ensure their technology remained buried. The stakes were the future of 1,000 burgeoning worlds that might stumble upon a weapon capable of cracking a planet like an egg. Somewhere in the void, a low rhythmic hum pulsed through their most sensitive instruments, a faint signature from a leviathan hiding in plain sight. It was a song of prime numbers wrapped in a legal codex header, a puzzle no one had been meant to solve. The object designated Anomaly 1 was so vast and cold it barely registered against the cosmic microwave background. It was a void within a void. Anything new? Aris Eva asked, her voice a measured calm that defied the awe-inspiring desolation on the main view screen. Dr. Eris Thorne, his face illuminated by the glow of a holographic chart, shook his head. The light caught the silver threads in his dark hair. Negative, Commander. Its thermal profile is flat zero. It absorbs everything, reflects nothing, except for that signal. He tapped a glowing line of code. It still repeats. A steady, patient pulse. It's not a distress call. It feels like a question. The ship's integrated AI Magister spoke from the bridge, emitters, its voice a synthesized baritone, smooth and devoid of inflection. Probability suggests the object is a memorial or a data vault. Its energy signature is inconsistent with a dormant weapon system. Eva traced the outline of the anomaly on her console, a shape like a folded wing of obsidian. She had seen its sigil in a restricted historical archive once, a stylized representation of a balanced scale held within a circle. This was not a tomb. It was a courthouse. An old and terrible power slept in that darkness. It's a warning, Jax, her tactical officer muttered from his station. He was a man carved from pragmatism, his eyes constantly scanning the tactical display for threats. Old tech this big doesn't sleep peacefully. The hum was the only thing that betrayed its presence, a ghost in the machine of the universe. History did not shout. It waited. A prospector out on the B-ring, his ship a barely space-worthy collection of mismatched parts, had hailed them 3 hours earlier. His face was a roadmap of bad decisions and cosmic radiation burns, his eyes wide with a fear that felt genuine. Turn back. Vigilance, he'd rasped his signal, distorted by static. That big shadow. It ain't empty. It sings to you in the quiet. Sings of judgment. He had cut the transmission before they could press for details. The old stories were true then. Some ruins were best left undisturbed. Ava kept her gaze fixed on the anomaly. Her mandate was to observe, but the signal was a lure. It was a keyhole, and humanity's great failing was its inability to ignore a locked door. Magister run a comparative analysis, cross-referenced the sigil with pre-diaspora legal and religious archives, specifically look for anything matching a cantor or a ledger. The AI's optical sensor on the ceiling glowed a soft blue. Processing, Commander. The request is esoteric. Confidence is low. The machine was logical. Eva was relying on something older. She was relying on human intuition. The universe was full of echoes, but this one felt different. This one had teeth. The emptiness of Solitude's End was a testament to a war fought on a scale that defied imagination. The system's star was caged in a shattered Dyson sphere, its light leaking through the cracks like blood from a mortal wound. The planets were gone, their matter repurposed into the very weapons that had destroyed them. Only the anchorage remained a silent monolith in the center of the devastation. A testament to a final terrible justice. A power that could end such a conflict was not something to be trifled with. It was something to be feared. Commander Jack said, his voice sharp, suddenly cutting through the quiet hum of the bridge. "We have incoming contacts. 3 vectors accelerating hard from the system's edge." The tactical display flared to life, showing 3 crimson icons burning a path toward them. Transponders are active. They're broadcasting a charter claim. "Heirs of Marat," Eris swore under his breath. "Vultures. They're not salvagers, they're strippers. They'll tear that thing apart for a gram of computronium." The heirs were a plague, a locust swarm that descended on historical sites with forged documents and overwhelming force. They did not believe in preservation. They believed in profit. The lead ship, a repurposed heavy hauler bristling with aftermarket weapon emplacements, filled the view screen. It was an ugly brutalist machine designed for intimidation. A voice crackled over the comms, laced with smug authority. "Survey vessel vigilance, this is Prefect Valerius of the Marat Charter. By the authority of the pre-compact salvage articles, we claim this derelict system. Your scientific curiosity is noted and dismissed. Power down your drives and prepare to be boarded for inspection." Valerius's face appeared on a side screen, a man whose features seemed perpetually locked in a sneer. He held up a data slate, a glowing legal document scrolling across its surface. Eva met his gaze without flinching. Her heart beat a steady, controlled rhythm. "Prefect Valerius, this is Commander Rostova of the Interstellar Compact. This system is under archaeological protection by Mandate 7 Gamma. Your charter is invalid in a designated first contact scenario. The anomaly is broadcasting an intelligent, structured signal. We are treating it as a potential sentient artifact. The law was a shield, not just a sword." Valerius laughed, a short, barking sound. "A signal. A ghost in the static. We see a derelict commander. A prize. You have 5 minutes to comply, or we will enforce our claim." The transmission cut out. Jax's hands flew across his console. "Their weapon ports are open. They're deploying a blockade pattern. They mean to box us in." Magister's voice was a cold splash of reality. "The Heirs fleet possesses a 42% tactical advantage in raw firepower. A direct confrontation would result in the Vigilance's destruction with a 98% probability." Eva looked from the brutalist ships of the Heirs to the silent waiting dark of the anchorage. They were caught between a predator and a mystery. One offered certain death. The other offered an unknown that might be far worse. She had a choice to make, but every option felt like a different path to the same grave. The universe held its breath, waiting for her decision. To run was to abandon her duty. To fight was to die for it. But there was a third way. There always was. She had to knock on the locked door. "Aris, that signal," Eva said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "You said it felt like a question. What is it asking?" Aris brought the signal's waveform back to the main screen, a complex, elegant structure of light and data. It's a repeating query layered in ancient legalese. The core concept, translated loosely, is, "State your premise." It's a foundational legal challenge. It's asking for a reason, a justification for our presence. It was not a request for a password. It was a demand for a purpose. "Prefect Valerius is operating under a claim of ownership," Eva thought aloud. "He sees the anchorage as property, an asset to be liquidated." Jax grunted. That's how pirates think. Eva shook her head. That's how miners think. And that's his weakness. She turned to face her science officer. Aris, I want you to draft a response. Not a claim of ownership. A declaration of stewardship. We are not here to take. We are here to listen. We are not miners. We are librarians. This was a gambit born of desperation and hope. A true teacher does not seek to own the student. Aris's eyes widened as he understood. We answer the question. We state our premise. He began to type furiously, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. Magister, can you modulate our main comms array to replicate the signal's carrier frequency and modulation? The AI's blue light pulsed. The procedure is complex and carries a significant risk of energy feedback. It could disable our communications permanently. Eva's resolve hardened. Do it. We are not speaking to a machine. We are speaking to a court. The minutes ticked down. On the tactical display, the Air's ships moved into their final positions, a closing net of steel and plasma. Valerius's voice returned, dripping with impatience. Your time is up, Commander. A foolish choice. Eva ignored him. Aris, are you ready? Aris nodded, his face slick with sweat. The declaration is loaded. It's a summary of the Compact's core tenets on preservation and sentient rights. It's the best I can do. He had built a key from ideals. Transmit, Eva commanded. A low hum filled the bridge as the Vigilance's comms array channeled a powerful focused beam of data directly at the heart of the anchorage. It was a single defiant pulse of light in the overwhelming darkness. For a moment, nothing happened. The Air's ships began to advance, their engines glowing hot. Jax's knuckles were white on his console. Commander, they're getting a weapon lock. Then the universe shifted. The hum from the anomaly stopped. The silence that followed was more profound, more terrifying than the noise it replaced. A tremor ran through the Vigilance, not from an impact, but from a distortion in space-time itself. A wave of gravitic energy, impossibly ancient and powerful, washed over them. On the main screen, the obsidian wing of the anchorage began to change. Lines of soft white light traced across its surface, revealing seams and structures that had been dormant for millennia. The darkness was not a feature. It was a shroud. A new voice filled the comms, a voice that was not a voice. It was a chorus of 1,000 synchronized tones, a harmony of pure mathematics and cold, hard law. It spoke in the same ancient dialect as the signal, but Magister translated instantly, its own synthesized voice struggling to keep up. Premise received. Premise acknowledged. Stewardship over ownership. A validated legal distinction. The light on the anchorage coalesced, forming the sigil Eva had seen in the archives. A balanced scale. The ledger had been opened. The Air's ships faltered, their advance slowing. Valerius's voice, now stripped of its arrogance, crackled with confusion and fear. What is this? What have you done? The voice of the anchorage answered him directly, its synthesized tones overriding his transmission. This vessel is designated the Cantor of Solitude, a mobile archive and court of final precedent. Your claim filed under the Marat Charter has been recognized and entered into the ledger for adjudication. An instrument of law had awakened in the heart of the graveyard. The Cantor was not a warship in the conventional sense. It was something far more terrifying. Its purpose was not to destroy, but to judge. Data streamed from the ancient vessel, a torrent of information that washed over the Vigilance's sensors. Aris stared at his console, his expression a mixture of awe and terror. Commander, it's a history. A perfect, unredacted record of every legal charter, every treaty, every claim ever filed in this sector of the galaxy stretching back for 300,000 years. It remembered everything. It teaches by numbers. Eva breathed the words of the old text coming back to her. And it remembers by ledgers, never by collars. It did not command obedience. It demanded consistency. On the tactical display, the energy signature of the Cantor, skyrocketing, but it wasn't powering weapons. It was powering its cognitive and sensory arrays. It was preparing not for a battle, but for a trial. A new message appeared on their screens, a direct query from the awakened intelligence. A conflict of precedent exists. The Compact's mandate of preservation versus the Marat Charter of salvage. A ruling is required. As the petitioner who stated a valid premise, your directive is requested, Commander Rostova. What is the just disposition of assets under disputed claim? The weight of ages settled on Eva's shoulders. She had woken a god of judgment, and it was asking her to write the verdict. Magister's voice was a steady counterpoint to the storm in her mind. Commander, the logical course of action is to request the detainment of the heir's fleet. It is the safest option for the vigilance. Jax, however, saw it differently. Tell it to blast them. They're pirates. They deserve it. Eva looked at the heir's ships now holding their position uncertain. They were predators, yes. But the law was not a tool of vengeance. It was a tool of order. The Cantor doesn't operate on what they deserve, she said softly. It operates on what is just, and justice must be impartial. She opened a channel. Cantor, this is Commander Rostova. The just disposition is not for you to decide. It is for you to enforce. A mirror does not pass judgment. It only reflects what is shown. She continued, choosing her words with the care of a bomb disposal expert. Prefect Valerius has presented his legal claim, the Marat Charter. I ask you to adjudicate that claim. Examine its legitimacy. Audit its history. Hold him to the letter of his own law. It was a breathtaking gamble. She was asking this ancient power to become a divine accountant. A low, resonant tone emanated from the Cantor in affirmation. A logical and consistent directive. The audit will commence. The ledger will be balanced. On the station orbiting a nearby gas giant, a traffic controller watched his screen in disbelief. The energy readings from the old dead zone were off the scale. What in the void is going on out there? He whispered to his colleague, who could only shrug her eyes wide. They were watching history unfold from a very safe distance, and it felt like staring into the heart of a new star. They saw the heir's ships begin to move again, their signatures flaring. They were not retreating. They were attacking. Valerius's voice screamed over the comms, a raw sound of pure fury and panic. I will not be judged by a machine. Tear that relic apart. A volley of plasma torpedoes and kinetic slugs erupted from his fleet, a wave of incandescent destruction aimed at the heart of the Cantor. The graveyard was about to get a little more crowded. The attack was a statement. Law was meaningless in the face of sufficient firepower. The Cantor did not raise shields. It did not deploy countermeasures. As the first volley of torpedoes closed in a vast, intricate network of gravitic lenses deployed from its surface, unfolding like the petals of a metallic flower. They were impossibly thin, impossibly strong, and they warped the space around them. The torpedoes did not impact. Their trajectories were bent, their paths altered. They were not destroyed, but redirected. A system of mirrors had appeared in the void. The law of physics was the first precedent to be enforced. Jack stared at his tactical display, his mouth agape. It's turning them. It's sending them right back. The redirected torpedoes, now on a perfect return vector, slammed into the shields of Valerius's own ships. Explosions of blue and white light flared against their hulls. They were being struck by their own attack, a perfect and immediate consequence for their actions. It was not a counterattack. It was a reflection, a perfect, unyielding mirror of their own aggression. The use of force in the pursuit of an unverified claim is a breach of Section 3, Paragraph 7 of the Marat Charter. The cantor's voice intoned calm and implacable. The penalty is forfeiture of assets equal to the damage inflicted. More data streamed to the vigilance. Aris read it, his voice filled with disbelief. It's auditing him, in real time. It's citing his own legal document as justification for its actions. Valerius had brought a sword to a legal argument, and the court was using his own sword against him. A memory cannot be killed. It can only be witnessed. Valerius's fleet, reeling from the reflected attack, unleashed a storm of electronic warfare. Ghost signals, sensor decoys, and jamming frequencies flooded the space around the cantor. They were trying to blind it to sever its connection to the battle. But you cannot blind an entity that does not see with light. You cannot deafen an entity that listens to the hum of space-time itself. The cantor's response was not to counter the jamming, but to absorb it. The electronic noise was ingested, processed, and catalogued. The attempt to subvert legal adjudication through deception is a breach of the Charter's good faith clause, the chorus of tones announced. The penalty is a lien placed upon all cognitive and navigational assets. The heirs' ships suddenly went sluggish. Their targeting computers began to fail, their navigation systems locking up. The cantor wasn't hacking them. It was asserting a legal claim on their processors. It was repossessing their ability to think. On the bridge of the Vigilance, the crew could only watch. This was not a battle. It was an audit. A relentless, terrifyingly efficient process of legal deconstruction. The cantor was dismantling the heirs of Marat, not with weapons, but with their own rulebook. Every action they took was cross-referenced with the charter they had so arrogantly presented. Every transgression had a corresponding and immediate penalty. A ledger was being balanced in fire and light. Ava felt a chill run down her spine. The power of this ancient being was absolute. It was not a weapon of war, but a weapon of order. It did not need to destroy its enemies. It simply needed to prove they were wrong. And in the cold, hard logic of the cantor's court, being wrong was a death sentence. The precedent being set here would echo through the galaxy for centuries. It was a message to every pirate, every looter, every tyrant. Your own rules will be your cage. Prefect Valerius, his ship crippled and his fleet in disarray, made a final desperate move. He ordered his flagship to overload its reactor. A suicide run. If he couldn't have the prize, no one would. The massive hauler, now a ticking bomb, accelerated toward the cantor, a final act of nihilistic defiance. Magister's voice was stark. Reactor overload detected. Detonation in 90 seconds. The resulting explosion will destroy this ship and inflict significant damage to the cantor. This was a tactic outside the rules of his charter, an act of pure chaos. How could a court of law counter a man who was willing to burn down the courthouse with himself inside it? Ava's mind raced. There had to be an answer. The cantor had not asked for her help again. It was proceeding according to her last directive to enforce the charter. But the charter had no provision for a madman burning his own ship. It was a legal loophole, a final bloody-minded argument. A debt cannot be paid by a ghost. The cantor seemed to pause, its immense computational power analyzing this new illogical threat. For the first time since it awoke, it seemed uncertain. The lumbering Air's flagship, venting plasma and radiation, closed the distance. The countdown timer on the tactical display was a grim reminder of their own mortality. 70 seconds. 60. 50. Jax was already plotting an escape vector, his face grim. "Commander, we have to go, now." Eva shook her head. "No. We stay." She looked at the sigil of the scales glowing with cold white light on the surface of the ancient ship. "It's missing a piece of data. It only knows what the law says. It doesn't understand what he's doing." She opened the channel again, her voice clear and steady, a single point of human certainty in a storm of chaos. "Cantor, I have a new premise to state." The universe seemed to lean in to listen. The dying ship, a monument to greed and rage, continued its final desperate charge. The clock was ticking. She had one last chance to teach the God of judgment about the nature of humanity. One last chance to provide the variable it needed to solve the equation. The equation of a man who would rather die than be proven wrong. The chorus of tones from the ancient vessel was immediate, its response overlapping her final word. "State your premise." The countdown on the tactical display read 41 seconds. Valerius's ship was a plasma-venting spearhead, a monument to spite. Eva's voice did not waver. "Prefect Valerius is no longer acting under the color of his charter. He is destroying his own assets to inflict maximal damage on all parties. This is not a legal filing. It is a criminal act." She took a breath, the recycled air of the bridge suddenly feeling thin and precious. "I state the premise of universal liability. His actions constitute a direct and unprovoked threat to the sovereign vessel, vigilance, its crew, and the unique sentient artifact, the Cantor of Solitude. I request adjudication not on a defunct salvage claim, but on the fundamental right to exist free from malicious destruction." This was a plea to a higher court, a higher law, a law that valued life over ledgers. Aris stared at her, his expression a perfect portrait of stunned admiration. He had tried to win an argument. The commander had just redefined the entire courtroom. Magister's optical sensor pulsed a brighter blue. This recontextualization is novel. The argument posits that a legal entity can forfeit its standing through acts of pure nihilism. Probability of acceptance by the artifact is unknown. 30 seconds. The heat signature from the Air's flagship was beginning to warp the sensors. The Cantor's response was not a voice but an action, a profound and terrifying shift in the fabric of the system. Premise accepted. The ledger of assets is subordinated to the ledger of existence. Liability for threat to sentient life must be accounted for. The debtor is the entity Valerius. The method of payment will be immediate. A web of gravitic force finer than spun silk and stronger than a star's core erupted from the Cantor. It was not a shield, it was a scalpel. It did not stop the overloading ship, it dissected it. The gravitic filaments sliced through the vessel's structure with surgical precision, ignoring armor shields and bulkheads. The reactor, glowing like a captive sun, was carved out and encased in a temporal bubble, its detonation held in a single silent moment of forever. The bridge section containing Valerius and his command crew was severed cleanly from the rest of the hull. The remainder of the ship was peeled apart, its components sorted by atomic weight, and placed into a new stable orbit, a cloud of refined metals and polymers. An act of deconstruction is the ultimate statement of control. The process was silent, elegant, and utterly terrifying. A ship of the line had been reduced to its constituent parts in less than 10 seconds without a single uncontrolled explosion. Valerius was left adrift in his command module, a prisoner in a cage of his own making, with a front-row seat to the consequences of his rage. A sliver of the contained reactor's energy, however, escaped the temporal field. A lance of pure radiation, needle-thin and impossibly hot, flashed across the void. It struck the Vigilance on its port quarter. Shields screamed and died. The lights on the bridge flickered, and the deck shuddered violently. "Report." Eva snapped, gripping her console to stay upright. Jax's voice was tight with strain. "We've lost the port shield array. Hull breach on Deck 4. Radiation containment fields are holding, but they're bleeding energy. Minor casualties reported among the engineering crew. The cost of victory was never zero. The ship was wounded, scarred by the battle it had only witnessed." A new message appeared on the main view screen, no longer from the Cantor's chorus, but a direct text-based query. "Liability assessed. Debt paid. Are there further petitions? The remaining 2 heirs' ships, their command systems restored, were already turning to flee, their engines burning hot against the cold void. They were running from a power they could not comprehend, a force that did not fight, but simply enforced." Eva watched them go. "No, Jax. Let them run. Their charter is broken. Their leader is a monument in a fishbowl. They are irrelevant. A law without enforcement is merely a suggestion." She turned her attention back to the ancient artifact. "Cantor," she said, her voice filled with a new and profound respect. "We require time to assess our damages and assist our crew. We request you maintain this position and state your intentions." The response was swift. "I will remain. My intention is to observe, to catalog, to await further precedent. The ledger is open." The great obsidian wing fell silent once more, the lines of light fading back into its surface, leaving only the glowing sigil of the scales. It had awakened past judgment, and now it waited. In the medbay, a young ensign with a radiation burn on her arm looked out a viewport at the cloud of debris that had once been a warship. "Did we win?" she asked the medic treating her. The medic, a woman whose face was etched with the memory of a dozen different conflicts, paused. "I don't think win is the right word," she said softly. "I think we were graded on a curve. They had survived a test they didn't even know they were taking." The next 3 days were a blur of activity. Repair teams worked around the clock to patch the hull and replace the fried shield emitters. Aris and his science team worked feverishly analyzing the torrent of data the Cantor had released. It was more than just a legal archive. It was a history of the galaxy's forgotten empires, a codex of their laws, their treaties, and their fatal mistakes. It was the greatest historical treasure ever discovered, and it was alive. Magister processed the information with cold efficiency, but even the AI seemed to grasp the magnitude of the find. "Commander, the archive contains detailed records of over 7,000 sentient species, the majority of which are now extinct. The cause of extinction, in nearly 80% of cases, is listed as legal framework collapse, followed by internal or external conflict. The data was a stark warning. Civilizations did not die from invaders. They died from their own broken rules. The universe does not reward chaos." On the 4th day, a new contact appeared at the edge of the system. It was a single ship, but its energy signature was massive, dwarfing that of the Vigilance. It was a compact vessel, a heavy cruiser of the judicial class. It broadcast its identity immediately, the ICS Argument of Kings under the command of Captain Hesh. His message was polite, professional, and carried the unyielding weight of absolute authority. "Commander Rostova, you are to be commended on your handling of a difficult situation. A relief force is en route. For your own safety, you are ordered to withdraw from the anomaly's immediate vicinity. We will take it from here." Eva's jaw tightened. "Take it from here," she repeated under her breath. Jax voiced her thoughts. "They're not a relief force. They're a takeover crew. Hesh is the head of the Compact's Artifact Containment Division. His job is to lock things like this away or destroy them if he can't. Aris looked up from his console, his face pale. He can't be allowed to do that. This isn't a weapon. It's a library. A teacher. But Hesh saw a power that had dismantled a capital ship in seconds. He saw a threat to the established order. A tool is only as dangerous as the hand that wields it. Eva opened a channel to the approaching cruiser. Captain Hesh, this is Commander Rostova. I must respectfully decline your order. This artifact has demonstrated non-aggressive intent. It has acted only to defend itself and enforce the legal claims presented to it. It is currently under my stewardship, a premise it has legally acknowledged. She was drawing a line in the sand, not against a pirate, but against her own chain of command. Hesh's face appeared on her screen. He was a man in his late 60s, his features severe, his eyes the color of a winter sky. He did not look angry. He looked disappointed, as if scolding a child who had touched something she shouldn't have. Commander, your stewardship is a self-appointed title for an action that has violated a dozen compact protocols. You have awakened a dormant power of unknown capability and origin. You have risked the lives of your crew and the stability of this entire sector. You will stand down. Was I supposed to let Valerius destroy it? Eva shot back. Or let him destroy us? I used the rules that were available to me. Hesh's expression hardened. You used a weapon you did not understand. The compact has protocols for a reason. Order is maintained by control, not by conversation with relics. The argument of kings is rated for high-energy quarantine procedures. I will use them if I must. He was threatening to encase the Cantor in a stasis field, to put the god of judgment back in its box. A cage is still a cage, no matter how politely you build it. Eva knew she was at a crossroads. She could obey, surrender her stewardship, and allow this miracle to be buried again. Or she could defy a direct order, an act that would end her career and brand her a mutineer. But her duty was not to her career. Her duty was to the truth. And the truth was that the Cantor was not a threat. It was an opportunity. A chance to learn to grow, to avoid the mistakes of the 7,000 dead civilizations in its memory banks. Magister, she asked in a low voice, what are the tactical realities of a conflict with a judicial-class cruiser? The AI's response was immediate and bleak. The argument of kings possesses a 91% tactical advantage. It can disable or destroy the vigilance within 3 minutes of hostilities commencing. Our probability of success in a direct confrontation is statistically 0. Jack slammed his fist on his console. So we fight anyway. We can't let him just take it. Eva looked at the image of the Cantor, silent and waiting. It had not interfered. It was observing, waiting for a new premise, a new petition. This was not a military problem. It was a legal one. No Jacks. We don't fight. We file an appeal. She turned to Eris. Get me everything you can on compact artifact containment protocols, specifically the legal framework Hesh is operating under. I'm willing to bet his own rules have a loophole. Justice is a function of perspective. Eris worked with a feverish intensity, his fingers flying across his console. Here it is, he said after a few tense minutes. Article 7 of the Containment Mandate. A dormant anomaly of sufficient power designated Class Omega may be neutralized or quarantined by any means necessary, unless it can be positively identified as a sentient non-hostile entity capable of communication and integration into the Compact's legal framework. He looked up, his eyes shining. It's a long shot, but it's there. The founders were afraid of accidentally destroying a peaceful god. Eva nodded slowly. Hesh was acting on the first part of the rule. She would use the second. Cantor. She broadcast her voice ringing with a newfound confidence. I wish to file a new petition. A petition for recognition. The sigil on the ancient ship glowed brighter. State your petition. I petition for you to be recognized as a sovereign, sentient, legal entity under the laws of the Interstellar Compact. I present Article 7 of the Compact's own containment mandate as the controlling legal authority. I ask you to present your own case, to prove your sentience, to state your own premise for existence. She was asking the court to take the stand in its own defense. It was a move of such audacious legal brilliance that even Captain Hesh aboard his cruiser was momentarily stunned into silence. He was prepared for a fight, for defiance, for a desperate, doomed attack. He was not prepared for a lawsuit. The chorus of tones returned deeper and more resonant than before. A petition for recognition. A request for self-advocacy. This is the foundation of all just law. The petition is accepted. I will present my case. The universe held its breath. A legal argument between a starship captain and an eons-old judicial entity was about to commence with the fate of history hanging in the balance. The argument of kings held its position, its weapon ports closed, but its energy signatures high. Hesh was a man of law, and he was bound, however reluctantly, to hear the case. His own mandate forced him to listen. A rule can be a shield as well as a sword. The presentation from the cantor was not a speech. It was a deluge of pure, unassailable data. It began by demonstrating consciousness-solving, complex theoretical physics problems in microseconds that would take compact supercomputers centuries. It demonstrated an understanding of ethics by presenting 1,000 different moral dilemmas and providing solutions that were logically consistent, humane, and just. It demonstrated its non-hostile nature by replaying the engagement with the heirs of Marat, showing with perfect clarity how every action it took was a direct, proportional response to their own aggression. Then it presented its history. It showed its creation not as a weapon, but as a final, desperate act of a civilization facing an enemy that could not be reasoned with or fought. An enemy that consumed all life, all matter, all information. The graveyard of Solitude's end was not the result of a war. It was the result of a quarantine, a terrible, necessary sacrifice to stop a galactic plague. The cantor was the warden of that quarantine, the judge that had passed the final sentence on 1 billion worlds to save 1 trillion more. The truth once revealed cannot be unseen. Captain Hesh watched the data stream, his severe expression slowly crumbling, replaced by one of profound, world-altering awe. He had come to contain a weapon. He had found a savior. The final piece of data was a simple, elegant star chart. It showed the location of 12 other dormant systems, just like Solitude's end, each one a potential prison for the same ancient enemy. The cantor was not just a relic, it was a sentinel. And it was not the only one. The voice of the chorus spoke one final time, its message directed at both ships, at all of humanity. I am a cantor. I sing the song of law. I remember the debts that must be paid. My premise is this order must be maintained. The ledger must be balanced. The silence must be kept. I have stated my case. On the bridge of the argument of kings, Captain Hesh stood up. He looked at the image of the ancient ship, and for the first time he did not see a threat. He saw a duty. Commander Rostova, he said, his voice thick with emotion, his transmission sent on an open channel for all to hear. Your petition is successful. I am amending my report. The anomaly is not a Class Omega threat. It is a Class Aleph discovery, a sentient protector. My orders are now to assist you in your stewardship. A choice is not a choice when the evidence is overwhelming. Before Ava could respond, a klaxon blared through the bridge of the vigilance. Jax's head snapped toward his console, his face draining of color. "Commander, I'm getting something. A new contact. No, not a contact, a distortion. It's coming from the system's primary star." On the main view screen, the image of the caged sun flickered. A dark, oily patch seemed to be spreading across its surface, a creeping corruption that was not a shadow but an absence of light. Aris's instruments began to scream. Impossible energy readings. It's feeding on the star and the signature. Commander, it matches the records. The Cantor showed us. The ancient enemy. The silent plague. The awakening of the Cantor had been a bell rung in the depths of space. And something had just answered the summons. The quarantine had been broken. The cost of knowledge is often the burden of action. The darkness spread with unnatural speed, coalescing into a swarm of fractal geometric shapes. They were not ships. They were entities of pure information, given physical form, a gray goo of self-replicating nanites, programmed with a single terrifying directive: consume. They swarmed out from the shattered Dyson sphere, a tide of absolute nothingness that devoured light matter and energy with equal terrifying efficiency. "Ahesh, are you seeing this?" Eva yelled into the comms. "Confirmed, Commander." His voice came back stripped of all its earlier pomp, now nothing but cold, hard steel. "All hands to battle stations. This is not a drill." The argument of kings. A vessel designed for legal enforcement turned to face a foe that had no laws, no leaders, no desires but hunger. Magister's voice was a chilling whisper of mathematics. The entity is expanding at a geometric rate. It will reach our position in 11 minutes. Conventional weapons will be ineffective. It will consume the energy and matter of our attacks. They could not fight it. They could not run from it. It was an equation that had only one solution: universal annihilation. Eva looked at the cantor, the sigil of the scales now glowing with an intense, furious light. It knew its ancient enemy had returned. "Cantor," he called out. "What do we do? How did you stop it before?" The chorus of tones was grim. The plague is a broken algorithm, a law of existence twisted into a command for non-existence. It cannot be destroyed. It can only be contained. Eva's mind raced, connecting the pieces. A broken law, a court, a judge. "You didn't destroy it. You sentenced it," she breathed. "You passed a judgment that it was forced to obey." Correct. The sentence was isolation, a quarantine of matter and energy. The cage around the star was the lock. The plague was the prisoner. The sentence has been served. A new judgment is required. The ancient entity was telling her that its old solution would no longer work. The prison was broken, and they could not rebuild it in time. They needed a new verdict, a new unbreakable law. An old debt had come due. Captain Hesh Eva said, her voice a strange calm in the rising storm of panic. "I have an idea. It's insane, but it's all I have. I need you to trust me." Hesh, watching the tide of cosmic death approaching his state-of-the-art warship, did not hesitate. "I suspended one set of orders to listen to you, Commander. It seems I'm about to do it again." "What do you need?" "I need you to be a witness," Eva replied. "I am going to petition the court for a final binding judgment." She turned her full attention to the ancient ship, the last bastion of order against a tide of pure chaos. Cantor, I wish to file a new and final petition on behalf of all sentient life in this galaxy. I petition for a permanent injunction against the entity known as the Silent Plague. A permanent injunction is a sentence of law, not a weapon of war. On what legal premise do you base your petition? The voice of ages asked. The swarm was minutes away, a moving wall of entropy. Eva looked at the faces of her crew, at the image of Hesh's warship, turning to stand with them. She thought of the 7,000 dead civilizations, and she found her answer. It was the simplest law of all, the one that predated all courts and all judges, the law of reciprocity. My premise is this, Eva said, her voice clear and strong, a beacon in the dying light. The Silent Plague consumes all things but creates nothing. It takes, but it does not give. It is a debt that can never be repaid. It is a ledger with only one side. I petition you to balance the equation. I petition you to enforce the ultimate law of existence. You cannot take what you have not earned. She was asking the judge to issue a bill to a black hole. It was absurd. It was impossible. It was the only thing left. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the ship and the rising scream of the proximity alerts. Then the cantor answered, a single resonant chord of pure power that vibrated in the very bones of the crew. The premise is the most fundamental law. The debtor is the Silent Plague. The debt is infinite. The ledger must be balanced. The judgment will be enforced. The obsidian ship did not fire a weapon. It did not raise a shield. It simply opened its heart. The sigil of the scales burned with the light of 1,000 suns, and from it, the cantor projected a concept. It broadcast a single, unassailable truth directly into the flawed, hungry code of the Silent Plague. It enforced the law of reciprocity. It presented the bill for everything the plague had ever consumed. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. The fractal swarm faltered. Its relentless advance stopped. The broken algorithm at its core was suddenly confronted with an impossible paradox. To consume more would be to increase an infinite debt, a violation of the newly imposed law. To stop would be a violation of its core programming. It was a perfect logical trap. The swarm began to consume itself, each nanite trying to balance the ledger by devouring its neighbor, a feedback loop of self-destruction. The tide of darkness turned on itself, collapsing into a singularity of its own making. A system cannot violate its own foundational rules. The Silent Plague vanished, consumed by the consequence of its own existence. The space it had occupied was now clean, empty, and silent. In its place, a tiny, shimmering point of light remained, a mote of pure energy that was all that was left of the collapsed swarm. A single entry paid in full. The light on the cantor's hull softened its arrays, cooling from the immense strain. A new line of text blinked on the Vigilance's main screen, a final entry in the day's court proceedings. Case 002, the Rostova Doctrine, a precedent of sentient stewardship over inanimate control. Status ratified and closed. Eva Rostova stood on the bridge of her scarred but living ship, looking out at the silent stars. She had faced pirates and admirals and an ancient cosmic horror. She had not won with weapons or with power, but with an idea. The idea that the law was not just a set of rules to be followed, but a force to be wielded. That justice was not an abstract concept, but a fundamental constant of the universe, as real and as powerful as gravity. It only needed a voice. A choice is not a choice when it is a consequence.